Thanks, Joel. It's a great partnership the National Archives has with the Ford Foundation to continue President Ford's legacy and bring to the community unique opportunities like this. The exhibit tonight, the rock and roll exhibit, is direct from Washington. It's the second stop on its tour, so we're very fortunate to have it here. When we found out we were going to have this extraordinary Louder Than Words exhibit here in Grand Rapids, we sat back and said, what would be an appropriate program for us to have while we were here? And we came up with the idea of what better way than to meet the local talent that brought rock and roll music to West Michigan. It seemed like a perfect fit. So we're going to learn all about rock music and how it came about and how it came to West Michigan here. I'd like to thank Tyler Leschedone and Seifert PR for helping promote this, come up with the idea, and developing the partnership with WLAV, and it's been a great partnership. So we hope you sit back and reminisce about the music. You'll learn firsthand about the DJs that provided the music to you. And if you like this program, we're going to be doing Louder Than Words, the British Invasion, on February 7th at 7 o'clock right here. This is the maiden cruise for Facebook fans throughout the country. We are putting this up on webcasting it, and Facebook people can see it across the country. This is our first time of doing it here in the auditorium. So thank you for your patience tonight. Tonight, joining us to my immediate right and your left is Steve Ulrich. Steve loves his music. He loved it in college, started with WSRX, those of you that are familiar with Grand Valley, and he's currently in the nighttime DJ with WLAV. Thank you, sir. Ed Buchanan, mornings on WLAV, got his start at Ferris State University. He's been on the airway, I'll just say, a lot of years, and we appreciate him coming here tonight. In fact, he hired the next Tony Gates. He actually hired Tony into the studios. And my notes say that Tony's done almost every position at the radio station. He's been there 28 years. What a wonderful career you've had. And then the moderator keeping us on track tonight is going to be Dr. Ed Martini from Western Michigan University. And, I wish I had a history professor when I was in college that would talk about music and talk about the events and how it influenced music. But Dr. Martini has integrated that in, and I understand the students love his program and learning about history and how it ties together to music. So without further ado, thank you, Seifert PR. Thank you, WLAV, for the partnership we have. And thank you for all spending your time tonight and volunteering your services. And we all look forward to your program. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you so much, Joe, and thanks to everyone here at the museum for having us, and thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. This is just an incredible turnout. I'm going to be very brief in just a couple of opening remarks because I know I'm not the person you came to listen to. So I'm just going to frame this a little bit and say, if you're here tonight, it's probably because, like me and like our panelists, you love music, that you might be interested in power, you might be interested in politics, and those are two things that I spend most of my time as a historian researching and teaching about. But what really got me here tonight and what really got me excited about the event is the music. Because music really is, of course, the soundtrack of our lives. And throughout American history, that has been true. And I would argue at no other time was that more true than it was during the 1960s and 70s. If you think back to those periods, for those of you who lived through it, or to a certain degree like me and some of the younger folks in the audience tonight, much younger than myself, you grew up learning about that time and learning about those images and those stories accompanied by the music. How many of you, if you think about seeing a picture of our troops out in the field in Vietnam, it's hard to imagine that without hearing the animals, "We got to get out of this place." It's hard to not hear Martha Vandellas doing Nowhere to Run To. When you think about the Detroit riots, when you think about the urban uprisings of the 1960s and 70s, you can't imagine that without hearing Marvin Gaye, What's Going On in the background, Kent State in Ohio, all of Vietnam and Bad Moon Rising. Just hearing those first couple notes of Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth brings you back. and sets the tone for that period. Those songs that these guys played and continue to play for us immediately escort us back to that time. And so as Joe was saying, when I and my colleagues, when we're teaching at Western and Grand Valley and all the places that we teach, this is a great way for us to bring those students back to that time, especially if it's an 8 a.m. Wednesday morning lecture and you need to get them going a little bit in the morning. Nothing like a little credence to kind of get the blood pumping in the morning. So we're going to talk about those things, but of course the story of rock and power and politics doesn't stop with Vietnam and Watergate. If you get a chance to go through the exhibit upstairs, and I hope you do because there's some tremendous artifacts up there for our fellow music geeks, there's always been a complex relationship between music and politics in this country. If you go back to the Great Migration and the migration of the Delta Blues up into Chicago, if you go back and look at early rock and roll and the challenges to authority that were part and parcel of Elvis Presley and Little Richard and all those early pioneers of rock and roll. Later on in the 70s with the punk movement, later on with hip-hop, even those of us who grew up in a little bit of a musical wasteland to a certain degree in the 1980s where pop music wasn't necessarily as thriving, sometimes we forget that that was still the heyday of Bruce Springsteen, that was still the time of U2 and REM and other bands that were trying to carry the torch of socially conscious music. And part of what the exhibit here is designed to do is to really look with a wide lens and a broad sense of how power and politics and music come together. It's not just about the counterculture. There's music up there about the conservative movement and the conservative backlash and people who were pro-war and pro-Vietnam and the complex intersections that we get when we really think about how music has shaped our life and how the politics of that era shaped the music as well. So thanks for coming out tonight. Again, it's the music that comes back, but it's also the stories that keep us coming back when we're trying to bring a new generation along and teach them about history. And so I'm really excited to hear the stories from some of the folks who first brought us that music and continue to keep the music and the stories alive for us tonight. The DJs that you all, by your thunderous applause at the outset, clearly still feel a connection to. So to get us started and just to kind of set the tone, I'm going to ask, just kind of go down the line here, starting with Tony, and tell us all a little bit about how it is that you first got involved with the music industry, about how you first came to be a DJ, and at the time when you became a DJ for the first time, what was going on in your world with rock and power and politics? And I think we've got one more mic down there if you guys want to share that one.
We do. We're going old. Whoa, my God. We're going old school hip hop tonight. It's past the mic, okay? So we're.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tony Gates, and I owe my record career to a gentleman by the name of Craig Lambert, but I owe my radio career to a gentleman by the name of Ed Buchanan. And very few people call him a gentleman, but I do. And I do. And it was interesting because I was working, I came to Grand Valley, and you talk about politics, and when they were first approached us to do this, I'm not political in the sense of like I want to talk about politics. And one of the things that I've learned on being on the radio for as long as I have been, it's 33 years in May, not 28. So let me just get that straight. Steve Aldrich now does middays, not evenings. And Ed is so modest, we don't have enough time to talk about his career. But I came to Grand Valley because they printed, my sister's got like 4 degrees and just was accepted at every school in the United States, and they kept calling her house. And my second sister is equally, well, almost as intelligent. And then there was me. And I remember when I told my parents that I was going into radio, it was just like, that's pretty much the day they disowned me. And I was okay with that. But I came to Grand Valley because Grand Valley, and I didn't really realize it was part of a political thing at the time, but their book, their recruiting book, their whatever the book is that they put out to try to get you to come to school, was printed, it was recycled. And this was like in early 70s, and I just thought that was cool. Plus, I thought I could get in. And at the time they had this multiple colleges of Grand Valley State universities and colleges, and they had this Thomas Jefferson and all these different schools that were just like even beyond me. I mean, people got credit for doing acid. It was great. Yeah, describe your experience. I can't remember it. You get an A. Or credit, or whatever the case may be. And I got a job because my major was psychology, and I got a job working, and this is... you asked me, and I'll tell you. I was working on a 5-year program with the Grand Grand Rapids Public Schools, which, by the way, have a very progressive, at that time, one of the more progressive programs in the United States. And they were trying to figure out how to keep their Title IX funding to fund full-day kindergarten versus half-day kindergarten. So they came to the psychology department of Grand Valley, and the guy that I was going to follow to Chapel Hill he said, I got the guy to help you do this, and he pointed to me. I got hired. I was 20-something. I had to wear a jacket and a tie, and I followed kids around for 5 years. True story, which sounds weird today. You can't say that, but I did. To try to determine, we came up with a psychological testing to determine altruistic growth. It was the growth between social, because you could measure the test scores, and they were the same. The test scores for full-day kindergarten after 5 years were the same as the test scores of the half-day kindergarten, but they knew there was something else going on. And so they hired the Grand Valley people, and I led that particular team, and for 5 years I worked on this program. And then they offered me, I was making all this money, and they offered me, after I presented the program and the findings, that yes, full-day kindergarten is worth it because the kids are more socially at ease, instead of like, okay, 15 minutes are up, you've got to now go to art or math or whatever the case may be. And I really didn't, all my friends were out at the beach having fun, drinking beer, and I'm in these offices doing these reports and stuff. But I did enjoy the experience, and I learned a lot. But we were kitty corner to the Waters building, and I would listen to this radio station that had this contest, and I could run across the street and win the contest. First person to come through the door. So I've got this stack of stuff, and I came from Litchfield, Michigan, downstate, and we listened to CKLW because we didn't have an FM station. So I listened to CKLW, and that was, so I wasn't really educated. So I started doing stuff in terms of music, and I started volunteering at the SRX, which was WGVU. And that's where I met Steve and Kevin Matthews and Tim Steele and all these other guys. And so I wanted to do radio. Anyway, long story short, you asked me. I put a tape on Ed Buchanan's desk on a Friday night. I'm living in Hudsonville in a farmhouse with a bunch of hippies and a goat. We made our own cheese. I know that sounds weird, but it was okay then. But I get a call at 12:30 at night. I got this big thing of popcorn in front of me. Hello, kid? Yeah? This is Gates? Yeah? This is Ed Buchanan. Wow, Ed. Wow. Why are you calling me? You want to do radio, kid? And I'm going, yeah, Ed, did you like my tape? I didn't listen to it. Part-timer came in drunk. I'm down here at 12:30. When can you be here? And that's how I got my start in radio. It's a hard thing, a microphone. This one's not working. Here, try this one.
In a nutshell, that's how Tony got into radio. Yes, it's true. We had a guy on the air, and he was inebriated. And we were in control of the weather ball, which is now at TV 13. It was downtown on top of the Michigan National Bank building, and we had toggle switches that changed the color of the lights. And we'd look at the weather forecast and then change the light. Well, this guy was playing it, just making it, he was making it psychedelic, you know, and our owner at the time that was his baby. And I got a call at home saying, get rid of him right now. I said, it's midnight. I said, get rid of him. Okay. Came down, and I had a stack of tapes, and Tony's was on top. And he answered the phone, and he said he could come down, and he was there, because I wasn't going to work all night. And that's how he got into it. It's pretty amazing. The stories back in those days, it'll never happen like that again, ever. Could never happen like that again. I got started in radio on a dare at Big Rapids at Ferris. My dorm people said, go on, you always talk about how you like records and radio and stuff. So go on down there and try out, go on the campus radio station. So I did, and that was in January of '66, and I have been on the air since. So it's been a wild trip. I started buying and collecting records in 1955, so you can say I'm pretty much a record nut. When I'm looking at power and politics and music, and I'm thinking back to 1969, it was December 1, and it was the first time the Selective Service did a draft lottery to see who was going to get to go to Vietnam. They haven't done a draft lottery since 1942, and now we're doing one in 1969, and everybody that I knew was affected by this. and they would draw capsules, and your birthday would be on it. And pretty much all the way up to, I think, 190 got called, got drafted. And my number was 76, so I knew I was gone. And I did end up going down to Detroit for my physical, and they told me to go back home. I wasn't fit for military service. So I came back and continued to play radio, but I started off on that night in 1969, and the response you got from the people who were listening to you, because this was their life that was going to be drawn out in a little capsule with their birth date on it. And at that time, if you went to Vietnam, you pretty much knew you were either going to get maimed or you were going to die. And that's what people were looking at every single day of their lives in the late 60s and early 70s. And we played Country Joe and the Fish. I feel like I'm fixing to die rag in about every 10 minutes while we were reading the numbers. They were drawing the numbers, and we would read them out over the air. They came out over the teletype, if you remember what that is. That was that little typewriter, if you remember what those are. They would constantly print out news and information, and the numbers would come over, and we'd just read them on the air. And people would call, and it was like, oh, my God, I'm number 3, I'm number 10, I'm gone. And it was an amazing time. You connected with the people you were talking to on the radio. It was a special time. We were a part of people's lives in the 60s and 70s. People had the radio on all the time, and we communicated with them. We played music for them, talked to them, and it was a wonderful time that I'm sad to say probably can never go back again the way it was, because there's too many other influences and streams that people are affected by, so they're not into, they don't have the attention, they don't have the time to sit and listen to the radio for 4 or 5 hours a day. But it was a wonderful time, and starting off in the 60s on the radio was something that I'll never be able to tell anybody what a wonderful feeling it was. And then when I came to LAV in 1970, it was the second year of the raft race. And that, of course, as we know, that kind of ballooned for 10, 12 years after that. And the things just kind of snowballed. We did it a little bit, like 3 hours a night, and then 6 hours a night, and then 24 hours a day. And then Tony came in, and Tim Steele, and Kevin Matthews, and Patty Hayes, and Bill Evans, and Doc Donovan, all these wonderful, and of course, Eris. Eris was the second guy I called for LAV. I had Eris Hampers. I had known from his days in the band. He was in a band called the Soul Benders, and then later the Phlegathon. But I had known him through those days, and I didn't know how to get a hold of him. But I knew I knew he had records. See, that's what, and I knew he had a good voice. So I needed a guy that had the records. So I didn't know how to get a hold of him. I called his mother. And she said, is this for real? I said, yes, I really want him to come down here and talk to me and work. And she says, I'll have him call you. And then a day later, Eris called, and he came down, and he never left either. He stayed in radio forever. And it was a wonderful time, and I'm just so thankful that I was able to be there for it. And I'm glad I was able to work with this guy and all the other people that have come through. I taught classes at Grand Valley, and all these people were in my class, and they've all gone on to do great things, and it makes me very proud, and I'm real happy about that.
So I came from more of the musical aspect of this thing, because my mother's side of the family were all like professional classical musicians of some renown, particularly in this community. And as such, I was like forced in the piano at age like 4 or 5 or something like that. And all of that was cool, except for the fact that my dad recognized I had a natural curveball and I could throw a slider at age 8, and I was left-handed. But, you know, we didn't get to pursue that as far as I would have liked to, which is weird because, like, one of the guys I used to play with out in the street ended up pitching for the Detroit Tigers. Now, we, my music thing went through, and I continue to perform to this day. And when I got to Grand Valley, I was pursuing music at that point in time, and I ran into guys who were on WSRX, which was this autonomous student radio that had no faculty control. It had some supervision, but it allowed you to create your own thing within a reason. And it was largely built at that point when we were there on kind of a public NPR type format. We played blues, we played jazz, we played things that weren't normally heard on the air. And we did have an on-air broadcast signal and got into Grand Rapids pretty heavily. Now, all of that was great, but at one point, then my mom got the call that, and this came from WGHN in Grand Haven, and they said, we understand that your son is doing radio at WSRX at Grand Valley. And she went, well, you're going to call these guys. So I called them back, and I got the same question, we heard you're doing radio at the student station at Grand Valley. And I went, oh, yeah, I'm doing that. And, of course, I wasn't. But what happened, I needed a job. It was late 70s, and the economy wasn't great at that point. And I beelined out there, and I went like, okay, I just got this call. They thought that was pretty amusing, and I knew some of the guys, because I knew Tony, and I knew some of the people who were, from record shops and things, too, that we all worked in. And they went, okay. They found that kind of amusing. And they decided to fast track me into this thing so I could take this professional job in 2 weeks. So I did a lot of overnights. I did whatever I could possibly do to train myself for an experience that was completely untrainable because the station was packing up and moving at the time. And it was just complete chaos. So anything I learned one day was completely out the window the next. It was just ridiculous. But in any case, that got me in, and the guy who hired me there is a guy named Dave Murray, who is currently our production director, who we work with on a daily basis. So, this is what goes around comes around with all of this stuff. And of course, I think the other thing too is just from listening to these guys and what they had done earlier is that, we would sit around, and anytime I think you're into music, and now we have people doing their own playlist, we have whatever. But at that point, there was no opportunity to do that. And what you did was you just kind of fantasize, well, if I had my own radio show, I'd do this. And we'd tune into these guys, and, it'd be 1974 or whatever, and then we'd be like, they're not playing enough of the new Bowie record. Nah, come on, nah. But we're hearing too much Marshall Tucker Band, or whatever. Everybody had that kind of thing, but everybody was dialed into this radio station. And I mean, it was really, really important. One of the things that's really notable about the influence of WLAV at the time is that prior to these guys coming on the air, you bought records in a department store, you bought them in a drugstore, wherever, there were a couple of old school record shops that were around. But all of a sudden, when these guys came out, there was all these hippie record shops started coming out. Like we had Flaming Rat, and we had even big stores came into the mall that catered to album rock records. And you could not do that. You could not go and get these things in other places. And it was this market just built up around this radio station. And the advertisers that we had as well, waterbed stores were huge and that kind of thing, right? And all of that just developed because of LAV, and it was an amazing thing. So eventually, we did the student radio thing for a while, and we kind of became the farm club for LAV. And that was just, we'd already had, Tony had gone through it, and Tim Steele and some other people, and suddenly we had the late M. Dung and some people like that. And eventually when Dave Logan was leaving, and he and M. Dung were going out to form KFOG in San Francisco, which was going to be a wide open broadcast format, that they got a hold of me and just said, you did. And Logan and just said, do you want to come and do this? We kind of need people to do specialty. We need people to be a little left field in this business. And on the same day, Kevin Matthews and I were hired to come and do this thing. And it was an amazing experience, and something that we continue to enjoy this day. We love this stuff. And it was just, so great to actually finally be a part of this thing that you sat there and listened to and admired for so long. And that's where I'm going to leave that.
He asked one question.
I think that's all the questions we've got time for tonight, folks. Thanks for coming. No, it really is good to set the stage and hear those stories. Maybe this round we could do just a pinch briefer because we want to leave time for audience questions. We've been collecting those. Give us a little. Yeah, we need an egg timer. Oh, it does. Okay, great, thanks. So Ed, let's start with you this time and just give, for those who haven't worked in the industry, give us a little window into this, especially since you were kind of first on the scene and hiring some of these folks. For people who were actually spinning the records in those days, how much freedom did you have? You obviously, with Country Joe, were doing something when you were playing that song during the lottery. So how much freedom did you have then to kind of choose what you wanted to play, say what you wanted to say, and how did that then evolve as the war ended and we got into the 70s?
Well, as I started in the 60s, I did top 40 radio in early 1968 for WERX radio, which was a Wyoming station. I don't know what it's called now. It was 1530 AM, I think. But they changed formats in June of 1968, and that's when I got a job on an FM radio station, WXTO, which was owned by the Catholic Diocese, and it was in the bell tower of the administration building at Aquinas College. The general manager of the station was Father Hugh Michael Bain, Father Mike on television and radio, and he was a wonderful man, and he spoke like this all the time. And they had a program called Campus After Hours, and I was asked to do that. It was on from 10 at night until 1 in the morning. And I said, well, what do you play? What is it like? The guy that was on doing it before I came on was named Dennis Lieber. He's now a judge. And I said, Dennis, what do you play? He says, well, we play some folk music and some show tunes. And I said, really? So you can play pretty much whatever you want? I said, yeah. And the show was called Campus After Hours. I said, well, there's no campus I know that's listening to the Kingston Trio right now. So I brought in the Vanilla Fudge. And I got a call from Father Mike. Edward, can you please come see me today? And so I went in and sat in his beautiful wood-paneled office, and Father Mike says, Edward, we've been getting some calls about this Vanilla Fudge. And I said, well, it's not anything, it's nothing obscene, it's okay, it's fine. And he said, this Steppenwolf song that you played, and I said, well, it's okay, it'll all be okay, I won't play anything obscene. And he says, well, we've been getting quite a few calls, and I wanted to tell you that I think you can play pretty much what you want. So I did. And in those days, we didn't have what was called record service from the labels. I had to go out and buy them. I spent my paycheck on records. Went to J.C. Penney, had the best selection at that time, until Believe in Music opened up, and the Flaming Rat, where I bought my first waterbed. And so I said we had to buy our own records. So what we bought, we knew it was good, and we're going to play it for you. So when you get a double album like the first Chicago album, holy cannoli, man, I got some music to play here. And it was a great time because you could pretty much, you did it on the fly. You grabbed an album and played it. And while that was on, you said, what am I going to follow this with? And you just kind of got into a flow and kept going with it. You could play whatever you want. You could play acoustic blues. You could play classic rock. You could play classical rock. Well, there was classical rock, Tone. It was just a wonderful time. And when I worked at WXTO for 2 years, and then they were bought out in the summer of '70 by WGRD. That station is now GRD FM here in Grand Rapids. I came to LAV in December of 1970, and the FM was playing, how do I call it, middle of the road? AC music, adult contemporary. It was chicken rock, I called it. And they basically turned it into an automated station, and I was running the tapes and recording Paul Harvey's show to play back And that was my job. And I said, this is terrible. This is boring. I can't do it. I get into this for the music, and I'm playing oldie tapes. We're playing Fats Domino, and all, which I love that. And we're playing all this. So I left there, and I went to Muskegon to work. I worked country there for like 3 months. And I got called back to LAV. They wanted me to do a nighttime show like I used to do on WXTO. And they wanted me to do it from 7 at night till midnight. I did that for about 3 or 4 months, and that took off. And then they wanted me to get another person so they could expand it to 5 in the morning. And that's when I called Eris. So we were on from 7 at night till 5 in the morning. And at 5 in the morning, when Eris would sign off, he would turn on the tape machines again, and you would go from Genesis to Frankie Avalon. It could be that stark. You never knew what was going to happen there. And then at 7 o'clock at night, I would turn the tapes off and start playing my music again. And that's the way we went for about a year before they finally realized we can make some money here. So we went 24 hours a day, and we had Doc Donovan on the air, and Bill Evans on the air, and Mike London was on the air. We had so many wonderful people came through that radio station in the 70s, and it was just a wonderful time. I left at the end of the 70s to build a country station, WCUZ, which I ran for 15 years, and I came back to LAV in 95, and I've been there since. So it's kind of my home. It's where I belong, and that's where I will stay.
We appreciate that.
You're in trouble, pal.
Steve, let's give you one here. So part of what this exhibit upstairs, this great exhibit, attempts to do is to show how artists have used their craft, their platform, thank you, Tony, to express their own views and to shape public opinion. So do you have a story from your time as a DJ about an artist that you felt really exemplified that, and that you felt really connected with the audience in terms of getting different views out there, getting people to think a particular way about a particular issue that was going on?
I don't know about so much as my time as a DJ, but just throughout music history, where, obviously that socially conscious lyrics and things like that. I mean, one of the first songs I can relate to on that level would be Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday back in 1938, which is a song about lynching. That was not a popular topic that people wanted to hear on the radio a whole lot at that point. In fact, her record label at the time, which was Decca, refused to issue it, and fortunately her producer ran an independent label, and it became a hit, and we know that song today because of that, and they put it out, but not the major label. And of course it goes through into the post-war era and through, the folk thing, which of course certainly came under scrutiny in the McCarthy era, and we go into the 60s with Dylan, which is really the linchpin of the whole thing, and Dylan and Joan Baez and people like that. And another guy that certainly exemplifies rock, power, and politics more than anybody else I can think of, Phil Oakes, who literally we lost over his commitment to this. But those are the guys that really influenced me in that kind of thing. And I think, that carries over. I mean, these people have become, obviously, do I need to tell you Bob Dylan is hugely influential? No, probably not. But that kind of thing carries forward, and it goes forward into, one of the guys we have an exhibit from in the hall here from Tom Morello, Rage Against the Machine, and people on the radio now who have done that. I mean, obviously Public Enemy was huge in the 80s and 90s. Things like that, things with a message. And I think the whole shut up and sing concept has always been something that I never found comfortable, because I think that sometimes when there's uncomfortable messages in songs, it kind of means we need to hear that.
We'll get to maybe we'll take an audience question after this one, but Tony, kind of similar question. Have there been times in your career where you've run into a particularly controversial song or a topic that either the station wasn't really excited about or that the public was particularly excited about that caused some interesting times for you in your career?
the setting was not so much the message in terms of, wow, listen to what they're saying. We have to perpetuate this as a movement. We have to make other people think like us, which is part of the problem, I think, today. There's too many people trying to do that. I'm watching the Golden Globes, and I'm going, I'm glad, I love your movie, but I don't want you to tell me how to live my life. So please say thank you, thank your mother, thank God, and then go. But in the meantime, what was happening was we were finding music that was like, because of the free form, you had a radio station that had no boundaries other than the fact, don't lose our license. You could, George Carlin gave us 7 words that we couldn't say on the radio, and that was our guideline. I mean, think about that. But I remember vividly the hate that we had, the hatred, and I don't usually use that word very often, but you had a radio station that had so much love and passion for the fact that whomever was on for their 4-hour period could play whatever they wanted to. And so you had 4 personalities, literally personalities that didn't even know they were personalities. They just had a passion, and they had various backgrounds. So Ed Buchanan would play a lot of Marshall Tucker and Steve's Reference or whatever else, but he turned me on to a lot of music that I love, and Poco and all these bands that I never would have heard of otherwise. And then Eris was just out of this frick. He's one of the people that came with the Pyramid People. Eris is one of those guys. We would drive to Chicago and buy imported records that you couldn't get anywhere else because we couldn't get them in Grand Rapids. And you got to remember, now we've got this beautiful concert hall across the street. There's all these things. We had to go a long way to get entertainment. And so Eris was turning me on to Gentle Giant and Genesis and Supertramp and U2 and these bands. There was like, I think we were one of 12 radio stations that were playing U2. When they came to Fountain Street Church, we had a church that we were bringing bands into. Fountain Street Church, U2. Ed sent me over to interview them. I had no idea who these people are. But my point is that you would have 4 personalities who would have 4 different radio stations. So whatever the taste of Ed was, in the middays, he was always the rock. That was kind of the guideline. The morning show, he asked me people want to wake up kind of easy, so maybe you want to play some Dan Fogelberg or Joni Mitchell. And the first time that I played Black Dog by Led Zeppelin, because I had about 8 cups of coffee in me, he called, and I said, Ed, this stuff has put me to sleep. I want to wake people up. And so just don't lose the license. And then you got Doc Donovan, who was one of the most eccentric people on the planet. So in answer to your question, it was so different. Now, what changed was the general managers were being approached at the time with homogenization because we would go from town to town, and each radio station had a regional music that they played or a regional favorites, or if it was Bob Seger or Iggy Pop or whatever, that was ours. And then we'd go to another town, and they would have somebody else, and you would listen to these radio stations, and you'd drive across the country, and you'd hear 10 stations, and there'd be 10 different genres. The Superstars format with this gentleman by the name of Lee Abrams, and I use that term loosely, went to program directors and owners like John Shepard and said, I can make you more money by having a wider audience if you play more music, like less music, but more often. Kind of a top 40 format, only they called it AOR, album-oriented rock, Superstars. And so they came in and said, you guys can't play all this music that you want to, and we're going to be more successful and you're going to love it. We hated it. And our audience hated it. Sky Daniels was a guy that was doing Chicago radio, and LAB was really a farm club for Chicago radio because people went from here to Chicago. A lot of people, and then on to bigger platforms. But I remember Sky introduced me to a guy, Tom Petty, and nobody knew who this guy was. And he couldn't get signed. And Sky would go over to Sky's apartment, and we'd play these Tom Petty music on cassette. And Tom would be right in there, hey, how you doing? And Tom had the personality of a stump when you first met him. He's one of the most boring guys on the planet. It took like 3 years of him touring in order to turn around and look at the audience. I mean, he was a boring cat. But he wrote music, and that's how he expressed himself. So I got this song, it's called Breakdown. And in the mornings, I was always looking for short songs because I wanted to talk, man. Let me play a short song so I can talk. And Ed's going, I can't imagine. Yeah. And it was Breakdown. It was 2 minutes and 31 seconds, and I got a letter that John Shepard called me into the office, and they said, fire this guy. He is breaking the format. This guy, Tom Petty, will not go anywhere. He will never amount to anything. And to John Shepard's credit, he said, well, why do you believe in this guy so much? I said, this guy is really good. I mean, they're playing him in Chicago. Oh, my God. We're in Grand Rapids. I have a picture of me, which is, by the way, to see George Harrison on this pamphlet with Gerald Ford and LAB's logo is what we've always been a part of. We were always the people that sat at the kids' table, but we were in the room, man. And that is so cool. And I have a picture, I swear to God, my hand to God, and it's one of my favorite stories, and you don't have time for it. but it's at the Grammys with George Harrison, Jeff Lynne from ELO, Bob Dylan, and Tom Petty. And Tom Petty, we became very, very good friends because I fought to play that song, to play that artist, and people like Ed Buchanan backed me. And so it wasn't of a political nature. It was just like, you don't know what the heck you're talking about. People are telling me they like this, and we're going to play it. And we fought the establishment, which was part of the whole political thing. And we won.
So clearly you're saying then that Petty's last DJ album was about you. That's the secret.
About a friend of mine who did radio in Los Angeles, quite frankly. It truly was. It truly, truly was.
All right, let's go and maybe grab a question from the audience if we could.
Okay, we've got a couple of really wonderful questions that people asked when they came in. So we'll start with these. First question, and I think any of you can take it. When you think of rock, power, and politics, are there any brands that have carried through over the years? Any brands?
When U2 came, because we got one of the first gold albums from U2, because when you left Grand Rapids and you went to the first time we went to a conference in Miami or, New York, we thought it would be exponentially that much better than Grand Rapids radio. And it sucked. And what we realized is because of people like Eros Hampers and Ed Buchanan, we were playing the music of U2, and it was like people know Genesis, they know U2, they know Supertramp, they know these bands because of the LAV and the people behind the curtain. And what happened is that band continually re-identifies itself, invents itself to the latest album, has crossed into every genre. I mean, it became when you bought your $300 phone, which was outrageous, you got a free U2 album. So that band transcended time in terms of a brand, I think, and constantly constantly remained relevant. That is really hard to do.
So just so everybody knows, we're going to go a little long tonight because I think everybody's having such a good time. So do you have any of you have an opinion on that question? We can move on to the next.
No, another band that has continually held their brand through the years, starting in the mid-'70s until today, is AC/DC. They are exactly, today, what they were in 1978. You know what you're going to get, and they give it to you. And that is branding, and that's what you call branding, man. AC/DC.
Okay, next question. On balance, do you think it helps or hurts an artist to be overtly political? For example, you had mentioned early Rage Against the Machine and Ted Nugent.
I think it hurts them in concert. I think it hurts him in the concert. John Mellencamp, a cool guy, maybe vertically challenged and got a bit of a chip on his shoulder as a result of it. But amazing artist. He does a lot of his own artwork, and I toured with him because I was working with Bon Jovi on the record side of the business, and he is very outspoken. But when they write the songs, and the beauty about songs, and this is why a very important part, in Grand Rapids is a test market. So when they want to roll out a new soap, they come to Grand Rapids, and if the Dutch people or the mix of people that live in Grand Rapids buy it, it's going to go nationally. That's a true story. And we were one of the first MTV markets in the United States. They came and they said, and that was the video killed the radio star. They told us we're a test market. They met with us. They said, hey, we just wanted to say goodbye, and they basically had a funeral for us. Remember that?
Ew.
Screw them, man. And they quit playing music. How about that? But anyway, so what would happen was when they started doing videos, it took away my imagery of what the song was about. And when the artists like John came to Van Andel, and people started booing him because he was so political at the time, and a lot of people don't want to talk about how much money they make. They want to talk about where they made their funeral arrangements. They don't want to talk about if they believe in God or not. And they don't, politics is something that didn't come here and pay money to go to see you in concert and have you give me a speech about politics. I think it hurts them in concert.
Anybody else?
That's definitely true. Today, as opposed to the 60s and 70s, it was totally different. Politics, you were expected to be political, even on the stage in the 60s and 70s. That went away in the 80s. Maybe MTV killed that, too. I don't know. I've hated MTV to this day. And they don't play music, so they lost.
to address what you just said, yeah, in the 60s, it was like, particularly late 60s, I mean, it was expected for you to be political. In the Jefferson Airplane, Up Against the Wall, Mother, ... MC5, and that kind of thing. And it was, these bands actually benefited from that kind of thing, I think. And, if you went to shows at that time, particularly the Airplane and things, there would be people from SDS or, these various student left groups that would actually, try and recruit you for those kinds of things. We expected that at that time. But now, when you come back to that, I mean, you don't, it's tough. There's artists like Jackson Browne, who we know largely for his self-confessional love songs and things like that. But there was a time when he went in and started to explore deeper topics and things about, international politics and things like that. His album sales just dropped right off the planet at that point in time. And I mean, that's just really one example of that. Little Stephen Van Zandt, who we know from the E Street Band and Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, did one great album. His first album is just this beautiful, great rhythm and blues record, and turned around and did another one he did a very successful protest record, the Sun City thing, which is actually, did a lot of thing to help with the apartheid situation, but came back with another record that was just all politic, and no one wanted to hear that. And it wasn't good. So, I mean, there's definitely a balance, and a lot of it is the artist and the music and the time and all of that. So.
Okay, well, next question. And I love this one. With the number of songs that artists have, why do radio stations play such a limited selection? And I'll use my own personal example. One of my all-time favorite Rolling Stones songs with the really one of the best Keith Richard riffs in it is Miss Amanda Jones. Yet you can never hear it on the radio.
Well, you can on a Sunday morning, 7 to 9. Breakfast in the basement with Uncle Buck. I'll play it for you this Sunday. How's that?
We lost radio when they broke up the phone companies and consolidation. They changed the laws. You could only own so many radio stations and so many newspapers. They broke it up and they said, okay, you can buy as many as you want. Clear Channel has got a $220 million debt daily or whatever because they own so many radio stations and they bought them at the peak of the market. We've struggled as various companies come in. What happened is when they invest that much money in a radio station, that you got to remember that when John Shepard, his pride and joy, he had WLAV AM and FM. They couldn't get the AM when him and his buddies are out drinking martinis, all the car salesmen that would go out to the lake on his boat that LAV FM paid for, they couldn't get the signal and the AM signal, and he'd call the FM hotline and tell me or Tim Steele called me one time, I'm a program director, he goes, John Shepard said if I don't play Barbra Streisand, I'm going to get fired. And it's like, whoa. So what happened was, there was so much money invested that they started doing research groups, focus groups. They started doing testing. They play still. Today, you get a phone call, a robocall, and somebody will say, we're going to play excerpts of this song. GRD just went through a major musical shift, being an alternative radio station to start playing more classic rock. Why? Because we're hurting them. And so they're playing these snippets of these songs going, if you're between 24 and 35, which of these do you like? And they'll play 30 seconds of a song. This is how they address whether or not something is popular or not. And then somebody like a Lee Abrams, Jack Wad, will say, okay, we're going to put together a playlist and you're going to follow it. And it's homogenized radio across the planet, and it's really hurt it. And that's why radio stations do what they do, because when you start going deep like album-oriented rock and you get somebody playing your favorite song, which a lot of people would look at you and go, wow, I'd never peg you for that song, dude. That's cool. Rock on. Way to go. But it might tune out the masses, if you will. So we became mass appeal. And as a result of it, the artistic... The other thing is working on the other side in the record companies. I went away and worked for record companies for 10 years. And what would happen is you had an A&R guy, which stands for Artist and Repertoire. And we would sign a band, and the Artist and Repertoire guy would work with that band for 3 albums. They'd put them on the road. They would stay at Econo Lodges. They'd just tour. Then they would say, write 20 songs, and they'd pick 5. And they'd say, write 15 more, and when you get it done, we'll do an album. The second album was the sophomore album, and that was when they got a little more experimental. And by the third album, you expected to be making that label money, or you went away. You had 3 albums to go. Nobody does that anymore. There's no record companies anymore, per se. People are putting their stuff up on, Beyonce, I'm just going to release it, I'm just going to put it out there, and we're going to sell a bazillion at 99 cents a single. So it's all about mass appeal.
The other thing I was going to say very quickly is that if you're worried about tight playlist, and you imagine that Sirius XM is like your escape from all of that, dial up one of their channels, just have it in your car radio and listen to it on a daily basis for about maybe 2 or 3 days. You want tight playlist, you're going to get a tight playlist. Oh, man. There's some very tight rotation on those things. Also, if you love Between the Buttons by the Rolling Stones, if you love that album, tomorrow I'm playing one straight up 12 noon from that. So
It's a great album. Okay, with the again, with that rock, power, and politics in mind, what is the best or worst lyric you've ever heard? Again, keeping in mind with the rock, power, and politics, best lyric or worst.
My favorite is
These are not my questions, by the way. They're from the audience, so don't kill the messenger.
Todd Rundgren in Utopia and the song Jesus Walked into the Desert, God Only Knows What He Saw.
Excellent. Good choice,
Thank you,
Tone.
thank you. Yeah, so.
I can't think of the worst possible lyrics regarding power and
How about
politics.
do 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 da da da? All right, yeah.
I was actually thinking of one that was kind of by Chicago that came off their 5th album. And the song is called Dialogue, Part 1. And in it, there's 2 vocalists, Terry Kath and Pete Cetera. And Terry Kath plays the role of kind of an older, socially conscious guy who's kind of quizzing Peter Cetera's character, who's a current college student. And Terry Kath in the song is like asking him things about, like, you know, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What can you do to change the world? What do you think about the war? What do you think about the president is doing? And mind you, this was in 1972, and think about what was happening at that point. And the Cetera character is just responding with, well, you know, I don't really care, you know. And it's just like, I want to maintain a steady high, he says at one point. There's, you know, and basically he's just closing his eyes to the world around him. And then the song comes down to the chant at the end, we can change the world, we can make it happen, we can make it happen. Well, what was the it? Now, this thing was released as a single on about the 1st of October of 1972, about 4 or 5 weeks away from the election. And basically, they had put on the radio about a 4-minute McGovern-Shriver commercial, you know, and I mean, that was a really crazy thing to do. So yeah, in terms of something like that, I would throw that out there on the plus side. But we have
Number
like
9,
all kinds of like,
Number 9.
I know.
Number
What was that?
9.
Ding dang, ding dang, ding dang. There's like, you know, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, always a classic.
Chuck Berry, My Ding-a-Ling, that was his only hit single.
I'll go along with my dingling. That's it. There's a guy
we
like
have-
Chuck Berry, an idol, and his only number 1 song in his whole career is My Ding-a-Ling.
All right, we have time for 2 open questions to the audience. Go ahead.
I'm responsible for that. I used to do the midday show, and it was in 1974. And Jonathan Edwards' album came out, I believe, 70 or 71, that had the song on it. The song was originally called Shanty, not the Friday song. But now that is what he has to call it. I would play it every Friday at 2 minutes to 2, because I would leave the building at 2 o'clock. And that was my goodbye. I'm going to go. I'm going to hang around the shanty. Goodbye. Here comes Jonathan. And we played it every Friday, and that song is still played every Friday.
You talk about a well-testing song, and the funny thing is, when we brought Jonathan back for our 10th or 15th, I don't even remember what anniversary it was, he tells the story that he quit smoking pot, and he has kids, and there's a picture of him on the album cover holding that big pot plant, and he's trying to explain to his kids it's not a cool thing anymore, and yet it paid for his house. So Ed Buchanan started that, and when I came back, I was living in Los Angeles, and I came back, and that was one of the first things that I did is I brought back the Friday song. And so I have a little responsibility in that. But yeah, it's if you don't play it, or if I play it, I'm on the mornings, and if I don't play it, if I forget, I mean, it's programmed in there now, but if I'm late or early.
You're late.
If I'm late, offices call me. Hey, man, it's our coffee break. It's like, we've been waiting here for 3.5 minutes. Where the hell is a Friday song?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it was very political, yes. I started the Comedy Hour in 1974. It ran until I left in 1980, and then I ran it on WCUZ for another 15 years over there. And then when I came back to LAV, we ran it for about a year also. It was a different time. The comedy back in those days was a whole lot different than it is today.
Yeah, Bill Cosby was popular.
Yes. Good point.
You know, you mentioned, and you're a fun guy. You know, there's been a lot of people. I love this. I had this man on the radio with him. We had called him and I said I want to interview him, and Michelle said, "Well, what if he's boring?" I said, "Well, then we'll make fun of him." But if he's a gamer, well, you know, and he was on for 20 minutes, and he said something that it really struck home, is that, because I was talking about how do you keep the millennials engaged in history? I mean, my God, at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're a saint. But he said, it's not only the millennials, it's the adult learners. And I'm going, oh, wow, the adult learners. I haven't heard that category. I like that. But you made mention of the song For What It's Worth. And this morning, the thing is, too, we have freedoms that no other radio station in the United States have. I played Country Joe McDonald in the Fish song this morning. I didn't play the Give Me an F because it's you can't. That's one of seven. I can't do that. But I played it, and so somewhere that guy is getting 3 cents royalty and going, who the hell is playing my song in 2018, you know, because we can do that. But you mentioned For What It's Worth, and I still think, I played that the other day, and that's the lyrics to that song. If you go word by word, they're just as relevant today as they were when they were written in 1967.
Dr. Martini, you have a question?
Yeah, just since you brought up the millennials and the question we had the other day, we've talked a lot about the 60s and the 70s, and there's clearly a lot of great folks in the audience who have been with you guys for a long time, but there's also a lot of young people in the audience. How many college students in the audience tonight? Anybody? Couple? There's a couple, so good. But there's young people. So I just, on a closing note, thinking forward a little bit, as we think about the future of music and power and politics, if folks out there interested in particularly music, not necessarily going the radio route, but given the transformations that you're seeing in the industry, if people are thinking about a career in radio or the music or anything, and they want to get out there and make a difference however they see it, what advice would you have for them starting out on their careers?
If it's music-oriented, YouTube. There's been so many bands that have been discovered on YouTube. Trans-Siberian Orchestra, we've been friends with them for 20-some years. They found some of their biggest stars on YouTube. The guy that replaced Steve Perry in Journey, YouTube. Funny thing is they called him and said, hey, man, we want you to come in and sing for us. And so they gave him an airline ticket. He was like an hour and a half late. They couldn't figure out where he was. He finally somehow got a hold of somebody in the recording studio, and they said, well, I don't have any money to get from the airport to downtown. I mean, YouTube. If you want to get involved in radio, which is, I don't know why you would on it at this point, because it's really, I don't know how much longer we got. Every day is a blessing for us. But we're trying, and as long as we remain unique and true, I think people can see through that. But I think the majority of the people that work in our radio station started out as interns, and the people that we've hired. So you can come to me from Specs Broadcast School, which is reputable, I'm sure, but I don't think we've ever hired anybody from Specs. We've hired people that have come up through the ranks in internship or started in part-time, and they found a passion for it, and they had to make the phone call and tell their parents that they were quitting school and joining radio.
A lot of Grand Valley people have come through, and, you know, Tone and I being the case, Ed being faculty at one point. So, yeah, that's true. And yeah, if you want to ask us how to make it in the music business, you know, please tell me, because I'm still working on it.
I just got one last comment before I turn it back over to Joel. As a treat for Ed on his way out, there's a special guest here, an alum from Western named Dave Ansel. And Dave has a special gift for you. I'll just give you a small hint. Well, Dave, do you want to say what it is? It is a recording.
No, I mean, you're talking about the way I pronounced the name of the band. Because if you remember that album, it was the Lynyrd Skynyrd's first album, and on the front, it said pronounced, and then it told you, and for some reason, Lynyrd Skynyrd. So to me, there'll always be Lynyrd Skynyrd. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to get in real quickly. This guy has always put together records like a great poet can put together words. That is his great talent, and you can still hear it. The good old days of LAV are still happening right now on Sunday mornings between 7 and 9 a.m. It's called Breakfast with the Basement, and we love this show. I get up early and listen to it. I'll get it in the car and drive around and just listen to it. It's incredible. And he still does his thing just like he always did, and it's out there.
So as a very small token of our appreciation for you guys doing this tonight, we have for you a Louder Than Words Rock and Roll Hall of Fame cup. And for each of you, a Choco Star chocolate bar. Ladies and gentlemen, please round of applause. So just so you all know, we are open until 9 o'clock, maybe a little bit later. Please go and see the exhibit. Thank you again. Thank you.